Hey, this is Mike Diercksen from Proactive, and you're listening to the Building By podcast. Tune in as we spotlight our guest, Tom Kellogg, founder and principal at Maple Insight. Our episode today is focused on taking an objective look at risk. For more information on this episode and others, please check out the Building Bite at www.buildproactive.com.
Welcome to the Building Bite podcast for construction contractors, owners, and insurance professionals, where you'll hear from the experts about key topics that'll help you be successful. I'm Chris Epps, Vice President at Proactive, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Mike Diercksen, our Manager of Marketing and Business Development. Our guest today is a thought leader in the construction insurance industry, Tom Kellogg. Tom is the founder and principal at Maple Insight. Tom, how are you this afternoon?
Very good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yep, fantastic. We're excited to dive in and get down to the nitty-gritty here. But Mike, before we do that, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing good, Chris. Excited to talk with Tom and really dive in here.
Awesome. Well, Tom, again, pleasure to have you on today. Before we do dive in, we generally start with our guests giving a little bit of a background on themselves. Maybe if you could give us a little bit about your story, your career path, and some insight into what led you to founding Maple Insight.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tom Kellogg. I founder and principal of Maple Insight. What we do is predictive analytics and loss estimation for construction subcontractor defaults. So what we would be able to say is this contract has a 15% chance of default, and if it does, it's worth about $75,000 or whatever it is. Before I founded Maple Insight, I was the purchasing manager at a CM in New York called Urban Atelier Group, UAG. Before that, I was one of the purchasing managers at Shama Design and Construction, and I ran purchasing for Greater New York retail, hospitality, and high-end residential.
Awesome. Yeah. And Tom, no, we're excited to have you on here today. And I think it's a topic that we're excited to share, construction technology, taking an objective look at risk. We talked beforehand and you had mentioned to me that you hate the term pre-qualification, which I thought was interesting. And I'm wondering if you could tell our audience a little bit more about your approach, how you're looking to maintain an objective lens within the industry and what the, Maple Insight is looking to achieve here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I really don't like the word pre-qual. I think a lot of my current and former colleagues know that I really don't like the word. I think it creates a culture of check the box culture where it's a one and done type of exercise. This company is pre-qualified, so for any decision I make in the future, I know that they're good for it. And it really doesn't it doesn't use a lens of the particular project or the time or the contract or the workload or the type of project, or it leaves so much out of the conversation. And I think it ultimately ends up doing everyone a disservice. Not only the CM but also really the subcontractor and also the carrier and the broker so what I really wanted to do with Maple, and I think the way to get around that is, rather than adopting this pre-qual mentality where the risk management folks are people who tell me yes or no, green light, red light, it's what's my specific risks right now with this contract here on this project, and does the reward outweigh those risks? And if the answer is yes, that's obviously a great calculation. And if the answer is no, you probably need to think about it a little bit differently. But the question, I don't think should be yes or no. It should be, how can we safely say yes? And once we have said yes, let's make sure that this decision is staying within safe parameters. I think a good analogy is a speedometer. What we're doing is, after the project starts, we provide that speedometer that says right now you're going 55 miles an hour, and right now you're going 60, and the speed limit's 65, so you can go a little faster, or maybe now you're going 70. Now we need to slow back down, and I think there's a lot of value in looking at it as an ongoing process rather than this one and done type of deal. I think risk management is something that's It's so important to an organization, and it's really, I think it can, it should be and can be so collaborative with operations
Hmm.
folks. It's really something that I think should start before a decision is made and really never ends until until a project is complete. So yeah, not a big fan of prequal. The word prequal.
Yeah, you can't just put it on cruise control and say, well, I'm going to drive on the highway until next year comes around because the speed limit changes, right? You can't just say,
Exactly.
I'm going 80 nonstop and we'll talk about it again later because you're going to get pulled over.
Exactly. There's so much that changes. A project, a particular company profile changes, right?
Hmm.
One day companies are very healthy, the next, and it's not a day-to-day transition, but the next they're not very healthy, and the same happens I know many companies who are tiny 2 or 3 years ago, and now they're incredibly healthy, strong businesses.
Hmm.
These profiles change, and by looking at that one snapshot, we kind of don't allow ourselves the opportunity to reassess. Projects
Right.
change, markets change. I mean, we had an enormous 5-year market change very
Hmm.
recently. Markets are going to change again. Micro markets will change. Miami is different from New York, is different from Toronto, is different from Houston. They're all different markets, and I think what's so important is to understand each individual influence,
Hmm.
and how that affects that particular decision.
Right.
To that end, Tom, I know we talked about you use a lot of different variables and KPIs and market indicators to sort of track that change over time. And I'm sure there's probably maybe a handful of our listeners out there saying, well, we already do that, given air quotes for the people who aren't watching, but we already do that in terms of pre-qualification. What would your response be to them if they're kind of stuck in that mindset?
I think a big differentiator between products and services that are out there commercially available now, and what we do is we're translating those KPIs, and we look for things like operational capacity, project adequacy, market stability, corporate sophistication, financial KPIs, and with that we generate a probability of default. So 15%, 20%, 30%, which is clearly an alternative to A plus, B minus, or high risk, medium risk, or
Hmm.
an ABC score of whatever it is. It's clearly an alternative of that. But another piece that I think is very important is I don't think it should stop right there. And what we do is we take it a step further and we say, okay, yeah, it's a 15% chance of default. But if they were to default, what would that economic impact look like? How could it delay the project? And what secondary effects might it have on other trades? Would a default here necessitate an increase in general condition spend? Would there be a liquidated damages impact? How much inflation has occurred in this particular market since the award was made? And then by doing all those calculations and performing that assessment, we can not only say, the alternative to maybe what's out there is the 15% chance of default, but we can say, and it's worth about $75,000 or $100,000 or whatever it is. And I think it's very valuable not only in being able to quantify that decision and say, my potential reward outweighs my potential risk, so this is a good decision, or my potential risk outweighs my potential reward, so this is a bad decision, but can help someone monitor it over time and say, this risk was supposed to be burning off 2 quarters into the job and it's not, or this risk was supposed to burn off 4 quarters and it burned off 2, so now I have a little bit more of a risk budget. And I think another important aspect is we're go back to that car analogy. We are much like, if you take the instruments out of a vehicle, it will run.
Hmm.
The instruments are a supplement to the vehicle. They help you understand how much fuel is left in the tank, how fast you're going, what your RPMs are, what the air conditioning temperature is, and what we can do is be those instruments to help you understand how far you are along that journey, what additional risks you might be able to take safely, which ones you might not be. So we certainly, we don't try to pitch our service as a total replacement. We do work with some folks who say, hey, just ground up, I need something I need something totally bespoke to our organization, and that's totally fine. We would be more than happy to accommodate that. But really what we are is those bolt-on services, those supplements. We're getting more information out of the same, or we're getting more out of the same information that you might have already on hand. We're definitely, we want to provide insights, not your thing, your new replacement.
Yeah, being that instrument that provides that extra layer of visibility. The great part about that, to me, from just a market perspective, is it seems like that sort of can apply to everybody, because even your most sophisticated contractors with your best risk controls, they still have claims. So if you can have better visibility into, all right, what's the where does that come from? Where does that start? And it's assign a risk profile to that. That seems like information that everybody would want to have. So I guess given that, I know oftentimes our listeners connect best to sort of a case study or an example. Could you give us maybe an example of a time that one of your clients, where you implemented the process, gave them that extra visibility, and created some success with those tools?
Definitely, and I'll give you two, both very brief. So the first is, and I think it's a great point to talk about the applicability at different levels of a contractor's life cycle, and how this. I mean, what we provide is really a service that helps carriers, brokers, CMs. We've actually had a couple subs reach out, and we have some limited engagement with a couple subs just to kind of give some insights. Lenders, developers, owners. It really is something that I think can be or something that we've seen is sought after and beneficial to everyone up and down that default risk chain. A couple use cases that I'm particularly fond of, though, because it's the ask was taking it one step further than what I think one might think of as a very low-hanging fruit use case that I'm very excited about, that that I'd like to share. First one is CM reached out and says, we highly sophisticated CM, very successful, very large. We have a risk management process. We have risk management processes and procedures right now. We need, projects have budget constraints, cost constraints, owners have certain demands. We'd like to make awards that are kind of on the fringe of these risk management processes and procedures, but we need some sort of way to mathematically quantify what this risk actually looks like, so that we can insulate ourselves from something that may or may not go wrong in the future. And what we do for them is, we estimate what that economic impact would look like. They say, okay, we're going to put some money into a kitty off to the side. If everything goes well, great. If something goes wrong, we have the money, to kind of deal with it and to rectify that issue. And I think it's a phenomenal example of how default risk management doesn't necessarily just need to be bond, SDI, or nothing. It can be these alternative approaches to understanding what that risk really is, quantifying it, and then taking a bit of an alternative route to insulate oneself from those risks. So I think that's a phenomenal case study. The other that I think is really interesting is something that we've been working on for a while now. We're a partner, it's a group of partners putting together a group captive that will provide SDI and project specific CSIP. It's called Go Captive Me, and the project what we've been working on and what we're offering is, if your prospective members coming in have immediate access to a suite of services, including Maple Insight, and not only do they have access to them, but they need to use this. So a member coming into a group captive knows that every member alongside them in the group captive, whether they talk to them or not, is all using the same processes and procedures to ensure the future health of the captive. Carriers get more comfortable with the policies and procedures that are in place because we've given them a full tour of everything that we do. So they know exactly what's going to go into this and how the due diligence will be conducted and what risks will end up in that captive and which ones won't, which gives them, lower underwriting risk, increased confidence, hopefully better terms, better rates. Members are happier. At the risk management itself costs less as a whole. So it's another example that I'm really passionate about, because it takes we look at, we're looking at this very objectively. We're quantifying the risks that are out there, and we can translate that assessment and those insight into savings and profit, which is, I think, at the end of the day, what most folks are, very concerned with, right? And it's such a clear example of here's how we can save you money, and here's how at the end of a policy period, maybe you earn dividends. Maybe the next policy term, those terms get better. It's just, I think it's a really it's a 400 level way of using the insight, which is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, true to form. I mean, it's all about staying objective with the state of your projects and your subs, and it's not just making a well-informed decision, it's making continuous well-informed decisions, and that's only going to breed a healthier portfolio. So that's really, really great.
Yeah.
And certainly, it's a powerful tool for you to be able to equip your industry partners with here. Chris had mentioned earlier on, doesn't matter what size contractor you are, everyone kind of runs into claims at certain points. And if there's so many solutions out there, is there a size contractor you think benefits the most from this, or is it really kind of a catch-all and anyone could and benefit from this?
I think it's more of the latter than the former, and I know that that's kind of an easy way of answering that. But what I have seen is folks who are interested in an objective way of understanding what that risk are fantastic candidates for this. And what we've seen is that they're not always CMs. So we work with a couple developers. Developers have a few CMs. Usually a developer is in one area, and perhaps a project that they have is in a different area, and they don't really know the subpool, and they've got a great working relationship with the construction manager, but it can't hurt to have that third party that says, okay, here's what the risks are that we're all collectively kind of going in on together. These are this looks like a healthy risk, this doesn't look like a healthy risk, this might cost more up front but save more later on. This might look like a great deal now, but it could put the project in jeopardy of opening when it's supposed to. And I think it comes down to more when I think the calculation is if and it almost sounds a little bit like a loaded question, but if the completion of the project is the date is crucial, if the potential damages caused by a default could be maybe not even catastrophic, but more than insignificant, they would be a good candidate for something like this. I mean, just kind of helps give that the forecast of what might happen. I think what's really important especially with subcontractor default is it would not be a wise endeavor, in my opinion, to avoid default risk entirely. I think everyone has felt significant cost pressures to get projects to go. The calculation is not I have $150 million, but if it's 165, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's 150 or there's no project. And with that comes a need to get creative. There are many needles that need to be threaded, and oftentimes risks need to be taken to get costs to work. I think that what's very important that we do collectively is understand when those risks have a higher probability, a higher odds of going off the rails, right, or driving off the road, and design an off-ramp if that were to happen. So we're going to collectively take this decision together. It is a little bit risky, with this project, with the market that we're in. However, our plan is if this starts to go awry, here's the replacement. This is exactly what we're going to do. This is how we get it back on the rails very quickly. And I think that's a healthier way to approach it rather than good or not good. We don't want to touch it, and then there's no project, right? And I don't think that's the right approach.
Well, Tom, definitely thought-provoking, and there's a lot to digest there, in terms of not only making those risk assessments, but all of the downstream applications, even beyond just like project go or no-go decisions, and, how you price out and apply that data. So I definitely thank you for bringing that to the forefront and bringing your expertise behind that. We generally like to leave our audience with a couple of takeaways, like 3 main takeaways from each episode. So given that, and you touched on a lot of stuff here, what would be your 3 top line topics that you would leave as takeaways for our audience?
So no, I'd say number one is that the risk must be quantified. If you look back to our roots and how we started, it was very academic and scientific in nature. When we are in our first, hours of our infancy, we worked with an epidemiologist from Johns Hopkins to develop a statistical model that is really rooted in academic and scientific methods. We took it further and he worked with a PhD who fine-tuned it, and the whole point was what we're going to use is numbers, and we're going to get back to academic roots with respect to how this risk is assessed. So I think risk being quantified is paramount. The second one I'd say is we need to, whatever the process is, we need to commit to it fully. I think that when we endeavor to create new processes and procedures or to follow new processes and procedures, we have to do it the same way every single time for every single contractor without any exception. And whether we make exceptions in our decisions, that's one thing, but to have followed that processes and procedures, I think is paramount to show consistency across the board. And then the third I'd say, and related to the last question, is we can't be scared of the risks that are out there. We just need to understand. We need to understand what they are, and we need to be able to separate the knowns from the unknowns. I think that's far more important than saying we're going to stay away from risk. There will always be risk. When you ride a bike, you wear a helmet because there's a risk of falling over. It doesn't mean you should never ride a bike, but just wear the helmet. And that's what I think is a more valuable exercise in understanding exactly what the risk could be and what the injury could be, rather than saying let's green light, red light, go, no go.
Excellent. And Tom, what about an action item, right? So like we mentioned at the top, there may be listeners who have done similar processes to this, but maybe they're kind of reevaluating, going, wow, this makes a lot more sense. We want to look to do something a little bit different here. What would that first step be that they should take when looking to make a change like that?
I think I would charge everyone listening to eliminate the word prequal from your vocabulary and just try replacing it with words like due diligence, ongoing due diligence, initial due diligence. And I think that it's such an important step away from what we've unfortunately become so accustomed to, which is this send it to the team, check the box. Are they good? They're good. Okay, I'm making decisions. Let's use those words. Ongoing due diligence. This was a safe decision yesterday. Maybe not so much today. It was unsafe yesterday. It's perfectly safe today. Things change all the time. I would charge everybody to just try to not use the word prequal anymore.
It'd be tough. Speaking for myself, but definitely going to try to work that in, Tom. Before we let you go, we'd like to hit our guests with a couple of rapid fire questions. So we'll give you just a few more, and then we'll turn you loose here. But what is it that keeps you up at night, professionally speaking? Is there a particular area of the business or the market that you're concerned about, or anything at the moment that's kind of a hot topic for you?
So right now we're we've got we're very busy, but we are very focused on a total software redevelopment of everything we do. So that's something that's very much on my mind right now. It's an enormous effort to create software and to do it perfectly, so that so many processes are automated. That's something that's taking a lot of hours right now, a lot of planning, a lot of working, a lot of reworking, a lot of brainstorming. So that's very big for us right now.
Okay, and it might be the same answer just on when it's completed, but on the flip side of that, Tom, what makes you most excited about the work you're doing right now? Obviously, you guys have developed a nice process here, and you're dialed into it. But what gets you the most excited about what you're doing?
What I really love is when we do an assessment and we're talking to one of our clients and we say, the probability of default is this. We looked at 210 potential associations. These 35 were important. this is how important this one was, that one was, this one was. A good way to mitigate this risk might be to dial in on this variable, and maybe we do something like this rather than that. And to see, it maybe sounds a little cheesy, but to see the smile on their face when they are, have a very clear picture of exactly what the risk is, and it's based in things that we've seen before and data that supports it. And here's how we can insulate ourselves, to make this decision, to do it safely, to support those subcontracting businesses and support them grow. It's really, that's definitely something that really keeps me going. To see how it's like, it's very cool. It's really cool to see.
Well, it's like not only are you diagnosing what's wrong, but you're providing a treatment plan as well. So that's a really cool thing to see.
Right.
All right. Last one here though, Tom. So you went out on your own. You started Maple Insight. There's got to be some kind of aha moment, mentor, someone that really kind of helped you take that leap. Who was that person for you?
I'll give you a big inspiration for me. Highly doubt he knows it because I've never met him. But his name is Brad Katsuyama. He was an executive at the Royal Bank of Canada years ago, and if you read into the story, it's an incredibly fascinating story. Long story short, he's in the finance world. What he's finding is that stock trades are being executed at different speeds, such that when he tries to execute one trade, someone's detecting that, and before he can buy more on different exchanges, they're buying and selling it to him at a higher price than he would have bought it had there not been that scalper involved. And what he did is, he's got this incredible job, right, at an incredible organization. He's extremely brilliant. He says, this is someone has to do something about this. There are people who will be better served if I make a change here. So he leaves RBC and he starts a new stock exchange called IEX. And what IEX does, the biggest differentiator of what IEX does, is if you're trading on IEX, your orders are routed through fiber optic cable. That's how every exchange works, right? Your orders are routed through fiber optic cable. But what they've done is physically made that fiber optic cable so long, I think it's 38 miles long, such that nobody can get through the exchange faster than anybody else. So no orders can be front run. And it's a very fair way of approaching the stock trading. And we're talking, it's, a difference of I think it's 350 microseconds. A microsecond is 1/1,000,000th of a second, and that's the kind of delays that we're dealing with here. But what was so powerful to me is that he saw a problem that was, whether folks knew it or not. I mean, the average investor the average person was definitely infected. The 401ks were affected at such a small level, but you compound it so many times and it becomes such a huge issue. His incredible job. He leaves it to change a behemoth of an industry. Stock exchanges have been around for 250 years, and enormous players. And he set out to really change that, for the greater good. And that was, has been very inspirational to me. And that was, when I thought about Maple and thought about, taking that plunge and doing it, I really looked back on that particular tale, gave me a push in the right direction.
That's an excellent inspiration there, and it's a great story. It's similar, but not quite the Office Space equivalent, right? Where they end up taking a penny each time, and it spirals out a little too quickly. But yeah, millionth of a second, it's all it takes, and it can make a huge difference there.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. We really appreciate your time. As you know, it's the Building Bites. So that's building insurance technology with the experts, and you are today's expert. So we always like to ask our guests, what are you taking a bite out of today? Something out in Denver. What's the number one spot for you to visit?
Big fan of soup dumplings. I lived in New York for 9 years. Love soup dumplings. I gotta recommend this place. It's called Nana's Dim Sum and Dumplings. It's in the Highland area in Denver. They have a truffle soup dumpling that is just out of this world. And I think I had it for 2 months ago, and I have thought about it every day since. If you're going, definitely get the truffle soup dumplings and either go early or make a reservation. It fills up so fast, but it is well worth it.
Chris and I will be out there in the near future, I'm sure.
All right.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to add that one to the list, Mike. That sounds truly awful. You had me at truffle. You throw truffle on anything, I'm in. Well, Tom, thank you again for chatting with us today. If our listeners are looking to hook up with you after the podcast drops, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
They can. So our website, mapleinsight.io. You can drop me a line on LinkedIn, or feel free to shoot me an email, tkellogg@mapleinsight.io. 2 L's, 2 G's, just like the cereal. And thank you guys both for having me. This was so much fun. This is awesome. Really, really appreciative. See you on the next one, hopefully.
Yeah, likewise. Definitely appreciate the time, and love to have you back in, 6 or 8 months, maybe a year, see how things are going, and see how you guys have kind of updated the process as you're continuing to build on it. So
love it.
Look forward to having you back.
Thanks. Love it.
All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Building Bite. This podcast has been brought to you by Proactive. Check us out on thebuildingbite.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for all future The Building Bite news and updates. You can also find us on your favorite apps, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Amazon. If you have ideas for episode topics that we should cover on the show, or you know somebody who would be a perfect guest, let us know at connect@thebuildingbite.com.